Hi everyone.
Oh, we're live?
We are live.
Oh my.
Let's see if this actually works though, because
Oh, it looks like you're live.
Can you open it? See where it
See? We're live.
People have to turn their video though.
So they can turn their phone. Can't you guys turn your phones? I trust you. You're capable.
So we'll give everyone just a minute to join the live. You might have to turn your phone screen because we are doing it side by side. I know this is a bit of a surprise.
Hi,
y'all. We decided to, we had a vacation coming up. Well, we didn't have a vacation. She was coming to visit me, so it worked out perfect. Thanks so much for joining. We see everybody coming in, and hopefully, can somebody in the chat just tell us if it's easy for you to just flip your phone and watch this on live, or does it look weird on your end? Hey, Gayatri.
I just hate that the comments are, but you know what? I can keep my thing open.
So I can see the comments.
Yeah.
Can somebody tell us if this looks weird? We had to turn it landscape view. Does it look okay, you guys, before we get started?
Sorry, I'm going to turn this down. Okay, there we go.
Yes, that's fine. Okay,
Same.
Thanks, Gayatri. Oh, that's perfect. Okay, yeah, so we'll just go ahead and get started. Thank you to everyone who is on this IG Live. As you can see, my mom is actually here in person in Cincinnati, Ohio. So I'm so excited that you're here, but also here on the live. So my speaker for tonight in the Fueled by Faith series, as I said, is obviously my mom. And thank you, Gayatri. You said good evening to everyone. She's actually in Singapore, so it's actually 6 p.m. her time. So I'm really, really excited that you're here, that all of you are actually watching. I've been super excited about having this conversation because of the fact that, you know, obviously my mom is so close and near and dear to my heart, but she has her own story and she was her own person before having me. So I'm really excited that you're here and that we get to have this conversation. She is a speaker, author, and coach. So we will be jumping into all things related to her life. Thank you for joining. Do you have anything you want to share before we go right into it?
Hola, Gayatri. I hope I pronounced your name right. Hi, thank you all for having me. Thank you, Taylor, for having me. I'm so excited, and I'm excited to see her because we haven't seen each other in person since October. I mean, aside from FaceTime, yeah.
Yeah.
Since October.
To those of you out there where the world is returning to normal, that's great for you, but we're still seeing so many parts of the country here in the States where it's not necessarily 100% normal. You know, cases are obviously declining, but not all of us are planning to get the vaccine here, so it looks a little different for each family. And so, yeah, she's right. I haven't seen her since last October, and so not just being able to go on live and do this in person, but also being able to have special family time. I'm a little out of sorts personally because, just warning you guys, I'm not feeling 100% the best. And then she's actually been on the road all day. So we are going to try and pull out all of the most meaningful aspects of her story and how it relates to life today. So jumping into the questions, how would you define your personality as a child? What would you say defined you?
It's a very difficult question. Of course, Taylor sent the questions to me in advance of this interview. And as I browsed over the questions, I thought about that. And it's a difficult question because I don't remember myself without trauma. So being able to self-identify as, well, I was a joyous kid or I was a this kid. I was always an introspective child, I think. I remember my uncle, your great uncle who just passed away, he used to call me Minnie Pearl. He would say all the time, "You've been here before," because I was very small, 5, 6 years old, but I sounded like an old person all the time. So I think just very introspective.
So an old soul. That's great. That's great. Well, that's cool. And
I was a caring child, very, very much so, because I was babysitting at a very young age, my younger cousins, and yeah, so I was always caring for someone.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's great. No, that's good. I mean, you know, obviously, most children by nature, I think, are usually more selfish. So the fact that you were by nature more selfless and an older, caring soul, that made you who you are today, I would say. Can you share one thing about your childhood and how it has sort of related to your life today and who you are?
One thing about my childhood, I mean, there are many. I don't know if you want me to go into the trauma parts right now. I won't even highlight probably what's at the top of mind, but one thing about my childhood that shaped who I am today is we moved a lot. In grammar school, I attended 6 different grammar schools. So every time I was comfortable and no longer the new child, the new kid, then I was the new kid at another school. It was almost every year we were moving, and not far. And no, my parents were not military parents. I realized probably a year or so ago, my mother was likely moving almost every year because she was a single mother, making slightly above minimum wage. And as new apartments, or she could find a better deal on another apartment, saving maybe $20 a month, we moved. Of course, I'd had no clue about that as a child, and I was always the new kid. So as soon as I made a friend, it was time to pull up. Yeah, but really it was time to pull up any roots before they could even get planted, and now I was a new girl again. And that, I think, contributed to me being an introvert, because I had to learn to become comfortable with being by myself. And even today, I'm better by myself than with other people, so I do struggle with maintaining and really nurturing relationships, because I flow well alone. I am good all by myself, but I know that, as an adult, of course, you could do a lot more with more people than you can by yourself.
Man, that's really deep thinking about that, though, because kids aren't really meant to be alone. And that's kind of like, I wonder, I don't know, my brain just goes to who would you be had you not had that experience of having to cope and deal on your own so much. But I also think it's the beautiful thing that makes you who you are, because you are so resilient and you don't need to necessarily rely on people as much as the everyday person who's been coddled since their childhood. So it's kind of like a balancing act. It shows like kids need to learn independence, but they also need to not be like completely codependent and by themselves all the time. So, and also, how do we foster strong relationships if we don't even know what it looks like, because you in your childhood were bouncing from place to place.
And one thing I'd like to add to that, what's going on with the camera here? One thing I'd like to add to that, as you said, the balancing act, that's one of the beautiful things God showed me a few years ago, that your sweet spot, that spot where you have the most peace in your life, is when you're in balance. You're not living in extremes. So you're not the loner, the introvert who clams up and has social anxiety when they come around people, and I really used to suffer from that. Sweaty palms, I'd be in a corner, almost like people didn't know how to deal with me, but they thought they had a different interpretation of me. Oh, she's, not introverted, but they would say like, she thinks she's better. She's haughty or pie. And it's like, I was none of those things. I would literally go into a room, palms would get sweaty, my nose would get sweaty. I didn't know how to interact with people, but I hid it well. But the sweet spot is in, yes, being able to function and be resilient when things happen, but also being able to allow people to feel needed. Every person on this earth wants to feel needed by someone.
Yeah.
So if I'm in a room with you and we're supposedly mother and daughter, but you don't feel like I need you, or you don't feel valued, or you feel like, oh, well, she can take me or leave me, what kind of relationship would that be?
That's a good point.
For my husband, if it's like, well, you know what, I'm good all by myself, where's his value? Because men need to feel needed. So it's all of those, the friendships, the relationships that, my friends are like, hey, haven't heard from you in 2 weeks. Are you breathing? And it's like, oh girl, sorry. I just get off into my own little world, love them dearly, would give an arm for them. But because I'm so I'm so able to function alone, sometimes I get into my own little silo in my brain. Okay. So it's learning that balance of, okay, I need to connect more. Wait a minute, haven't talked to a friend. Hey girl, I beat you to calling me.
And that intentionality, I think that's the one thing that my biggest takeaway from you is like being intentional where you know that you have an opportunity to grow. If you know that it's like I like to talk a lot, and so I can be an extreme extrovert, and over the past few years, on the opposite side of that, I've had to learn to balance being an extrovert, but also being able to take time for myself. It also changes too once you have kids, I think, too. Like, then you just want the time to yourself. So that's a really good point, and I appreciate you sharing that. One thing that I do want to call out about my mom is I think because of your experience having moving so much instability, in so many ways you did provide stability to me. Like, I went to the same grammar school for the most part. I did move to Georgia for like 2 years, and then we moved right back to the same town. Like, she could have moved me back into a whole nother neighborhood, but I literally left, came back in 2 years, and people still remembered me, like the same friends from kindergarten. So I can appreciate that you gave me that, because now I do have it's a priority for me to have stability for my kids and my family. So that's a good point. So going into a little bit of the heavier stuff.
Okay.
I know that you did experience sexual trauma, and so I guess one of the questions that I had thought through in the process of preparing for this was, thinking about the sexual trauma. What do you feel robbed of because of what you experienced, and how it relates, like as it specifically relates to your youth? What do you feel like you were robbed of at youth?
You said earlier that you were thinking about, wow, who would I have been if I didn't move as much? I felt robbed of consistency and stability and safety and being supported. I mean, sexual trauma is one of those things that, we talk about fight, flight. It used to just be fight or flight. Now it's fight, flight, or freeze. Because some people, when they deal with that, they go inside of themselves. And I became an expert at compartmentalizing and disassociating. Not dissociative disorder, but literally disassociating, pulling myself out of a situation and going to a safe space in my head where I was okay. And I wasn't feeling what was being done to me. The main thing that I felt robbed of is, as a child, even though I wasn't raised in a stable home with a mother and father and seeing good relationships, because I watched Little House on the Prairie, y'all listen. When I tell you God left rams in the bushes for me, I'm a Christian, I'm a believer, but I wasn't raised as a Christian. I wasn't raised in the church. My mother didn't take me to church. But God left rams in the bushes. For me, a ram in the bush was Little House on the Prairie. I didn't have the adult leadership to show me what a good parent is and, the safe household. Yeah. They were having parties and I was babysitting, and it was never a real safe environment. But more than anything, because I watched Little House on the Prairie, I knew as an early child, you're supposed to be a virgin until you get married. And I knew that I wanted to get married, right? And I was going to be a virgin. I was going to keep myself. And the thing that was robbed from me was my virginity. So being robbed of my safety was one thing, but then also this gift that I was supposed to be able to give to the person whom I chose and who chose me.
And that you were excited, specifically.
I was excited
Yep.
because I knew, you're supposed to be a virgin and it's supposed to be special and you're supposed to get married one time, and I didn't have that. And so for me, sex became this thing that meant nothing. Meant nothing. It wasn't this emotional attachment anymore because I couldn't emotionally attach to sex if I was being raped by my father.
Exactly. So this is kind of the point now where we tell you this is the moment where you might want to listen to this if you do have children in the household. This is the interview is going to go in a different direction where it's more focused on adult conversation. So maybe transition your kids out of the other room or watch it on the replay. But that's deep.
Or use earbuds.
I guess, right? Like, what year am I from?
We're in 2021. They have this thing called earbuds.
My mom has to remind me to use earbuds. Or use earbuds. Yes, exactly. So, wow, that's deep. And I do feel like a lot of times the enemy attacks us where we care the most, right? So you cared the most through watching Little House on the Prairie about preserving your virginity, and then that's the one thing that you felt robbed of. How would you say the sexual trauma has affected your relationships today?
So when I saw that question, I was like, ooh, how much of that do we go into? But as I said, sex for a long time meant nothing to me. It was just something that I could use. And I share this in my book, that I could use as a control mechanism. Let's get it out of the way. I wanted to be loved and to be seen and to be honored and all these things for such a long time. And when I was an adult, because I hadn't dealt with the trauma, because I had suppressed so many things and compartmentalized so many things, you know yourself, it took me the longest time to call what my father did to me rape.
Yep.
Even though it was blatant rape, and it was more than once. I called it incest because the world doesn't want to hear that a father raped his daughter. You know, it's offensive to hear. But until I could come into my own and realize I don't own that shame.
Yep.
I didn't do anything wrong.
Yep.
This was a grown man who helped to produce me, right? Who helped to create me, who should have been my protector and not my offender. So when I was able to own that, then I could call it what it was. It was a complete violation of my body, my rights, my safety, my identity.
Yep.
Because it changed me so desperately. And today, I mean, I'm so much better than I used to be. Now, I see sex in a different way, of course. But for a long time, it was just something, just control. Okay, if I want to, fine. If I don't, if I'm, because I'm a Christian, I'm trying to abstain from sex. Okay, great. It was still this thing that was no longer precious. It was no longer something that I owned anymore. And then I began to almost use it. Now, I was never like highly promiscuous. I'm just passing it out like Skittles. No, I wasn't. But
passing it out like Skittles.
But if I did, if I was interested in someone and, I didn't have many guys trying to get sex from me to manipulate me. I think I have the story of I used it to control the guy until he would say he loved me, then I'd lose interest.
And because of, again, it's not just the sexual trauma, it's also the being able to, people, you take them or leave them, that, they're there for a season in time. There's like that quote, season, reason, lifetime. You go through things for a season, a reason, or some people are in your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. Mm-hmm. And I feel like you kind of, from what you're sharing with me, is like you lived in this space of everybody's in my life for a season. And then they're gone.
I would have to interject there. I say season, reason, lifetime, or treason. Because sometimes people are there, like you said, the very thing that the enemy knows you have the most treasure in, the thing you value the most, the thing that's the most important to you, he will use that to try to destroy you. And he will use individuals to be treasonous against you to destroy you. And so I've seen people in my life for treason. Right? Who've come to destroy me and come for their own selfish intent.
Yeah.
And then I have to recover. But first I have to face it. And for a long time I didn't face things. I just suppressed everything.
So let's pause there, I guess, and go into this direction. And thank you for being so transparent. I mean, you guys already know the story, so I'm not overly shocked, but there are many components of my mom's story that for me are like, whoa, like what you said about just being not overly promiscuous, but just kind of looking at intimacy in a different light. So, which makes total sense if you're robbed of that, And so I guess, can you share one person specifically that you're struggling to overcome anger or are struggling to forgive and why? And then that will also lead into, since you're already thinking about it, I just want to nudge it in there. What would you say to that person?
Oddly enough, the person that I'm struggling still, and I thought I had forgiven this individual, that person died a month ago, and that is an aunt.
Oh.
I know.
So that was a shocker.
I know.
I'm like...
I thought I'd forgiven her. And this aunt, I'll have to give you the backstory. So the first person to sexually assault me was not my father, as Taylor knows. It was my uncle, my father's brother, and he molested me. I won't share the full details of the story, but when my aunt my mother's sister, who was with my father's brother, when she found out about it, she was my favorite aunt at the time. She cornered me in my grandmother's bathroom, asked me if I could go in there and talk to her for a second. I'm like, this is my favorite aunt, of course. What do you want to talk about? And she cornered me in the bathroom, stood in front of the door, barricaded the door, and would not leave. What is this I hear about you saying that he's touching you, he's done this? And I said, he was. You're lying. Why would you say this? You can't come to my house anymore. You can't be around your cousins anymore. And I was devastated. And I was, in addition to the trauma that I experienced from this favorite uncle who used to call me Minnie Pearl, who told me I was an old soul and I'd been here before, and he, I thought, saw me, you know, because I was this little girl dying to be seen and to be validated and to feel special. He saw me, but then when he saw me, he wanted to put his hands on me and touch me in sexual ways. And that was bad enough, but now my favorite aunt has told me I'm lying and is now punishing me because I've told the truth, and there's no way for me to defend myself or convince her that it's the truth. Well, eventually, as I'm trying to maneuver around her to get out of the bathroom, she pushed me and I slid across the floor. The back of my head hit the side of the tub and I belted out this scream, and my grandmother was like, what's going on in there? And then finally she left the bathroom. She left the bathroom, moved from in front of the door. I was able to run out. I'm crying. And she started a rumor telling people in the family, I was like 10 years old, that I tried to fight her for no reason. Just my favorite aunt, I just decided I want to fight her. I'm like 70 pounds, maybe, wet. She was at least 250. It makes no sense, but, you know, kids are to be seen and not heard, especially in that day. So the family just believed her. And it would take 11 years until, well, 12 years actually, until I received a pseudo apology from her when she found out that it was the truth. And she found out it was the truth by asking him. And she said, you know, years ago, Michelle said you molested her. Was that true? He said, yes. She said, well, why didn't you tell me that? He said, you never asked me. You just assumed she was lying. And the molestation was bad enough. What my father did to me was bad enough. My aunt, though, I held to a different standard because my father and my uncle came from a broken home, and this is not excusing what they did. There is never a reason for any person, male or female, to put their hands on a child in a sexual way, in a way that removes their safety, in a way that they don't want to be touched. There is never a reason for that. But
they came from abuse, though.
They came from abuse. They were in foster care system. They were physically and sexually abused, and they did what they knew. So my aunt, on the other hand, came from a 2-parent home, was my mother's sister, she knew better in my mind. So I'm still struggling with, even though she died a month ago, I'm still struggling with releasing her from that. And then not just that, but there's, as you know, there's so many other things that she did and that were just really spiteful and evil things. And although I'm not like hating her, I don't hate her, but I am struggling to give her the same kind of excuse that I gave my uncle and father.
Yep. Wow. And okay.
And even mother.
So the other part is, what would you say to her?
I would ask her why. Like, tell me why. Why and how? Why would you do that to me, and how could you do it to me? Everything. When you saw, when you were there, when you knew, when you're a woman, like, I put a different level of responsibility on women. We're supposed to be caregivers and caretakers, and we're supposed to take care of the village and the little girls. And why and how? Like, how did you sleep with yourself? And not just that, but all the other things that she did. Like, how? I cannot, there's no way that a child could say that someone I'm with, that my husband has touched them, and I'm going to tell them they're lying. If anything, I'm going to get arrested. You already know. So, because I'm about protecting children and women, and you just, like, why and how. So, and I think part of the why and how is to even give her an excuse. Because as you know, my aunt, your great aunt, my mother, your grandmother, they never lived in truth. They didn't share their truth.
Yeah.
They didn't share their story. So maybe if I knew why, maybe that could explain, well, maybe she was molested, or maybe this, or maybe that.
To have just to have that empathy too.
Yeah.
Like, because I feel like too, just to chime in here, like I feel like a lot of times when people do things that are unexplainable and we don't have a why, it can make them feel a little dehumanized, in the sense that, like, for me, I've never really had any, like, she used to be one of my favorite aunts too, and then once my grandmother passed away, that's a whole nother story for another day, but that's when I realized, like, I can't stand this woman, and so for me, I'm just being honest, like, for me, I think I still have some resentments there, but I feel like if I knew why, just to be able to understand the root of some of those issues, it would make her more human to me, versus like an adversary.
Versus like some kind of demon.
Exactly.
Like you're getting off on hurting people.
Exactly. Because she had some very toxic ways. So, I guess we'll move into, I know this is all really heavy, so I'm just going to throw in a random curveball. Is there anything exciting that you're watching right now? That was not one of the questions, but I feel like this conversation is very heavy, so is there anything you're watching right now that you're enjoying?
Well, lo and behold, I'm not going to lighten up the conversation with what I'm watching. I am watching Criminal Minds.
Oh, guys!
I love Criminal Minds. That is like my favorite, one of my favorite shows. I love Criminal Minds. I love it. And it's heavy. I also love Law and Order. I love Law and Order SVU.
What's your favorite happy movie?
That's sad. Wait, happy movie?
We watched one. What was it back in the day with Adam Sandler?
Oh, I love all Adam Sandler movies. Wedding Singer.
Oh, I love The Wedding Singer.
Waterboy.
Drew Barrymore.
Yes, The Waterboy. 50 First Dates.
Yep. Those are good.
I love humor, comedy. The Upshaws is a good movie. Not a good movie. It's a TV series.
Oh.
The Upshaws. It's funny.
Okay, good. Okay. Just to get some, something else flowing in here, you guys. Are you guys still awake out there? If you have any questions for my mom, Michelle Jackson, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll try and get those answered. I see that you're still watching, so that means you must be interested. But if you have any questions, it does get a little bit more positive, right? We just want to talk through some of the things, because I feel like there are so many people online who are sharing these happy-go-lucky stories, but we never tell the stories of what got us to this point. And so what got us here, where we can sit and talk about this and laugh and have conversation. So I did read in your book, and I know this about you already, but that you had suffered with attempted suicide. And I guess, how many total attempted suicide attempts did you have? That did not make any sense.
How many total suicide attempts were there? 4.
Okay.
So the first, I was 12 years.
Before you go through them, and also, is there anything that stands out about all of those experiences combined? So I know you had 4 attempts starting at the age of 12, and then your last attempt was probably about 10 years ago?
No, it was actually, I was 30. I'm 49 now, so almost 19 years ago.
Okay.
It'll be 19 years in October.
I don't know why I keep saying 10. So what stands out to you about those experiences combined? Is there any one thing that, when you think about them all, they all have it in common?
Hopelessness. That I was completely hopeless for each one. But also, there were some highlights. That sounds so awful, because I would never, of course, promote suicide. Each and every one of you, if you're living and breathing, if you are watching this, there is value and there is purpose for your life. God wants to use you for something. So suicide is never the answer. But the first suicide attempt, oddly enough, I was 12 years old. My mother's boyfriend and my aunt's boyfriend were at our apartment. We were moving, and I attempted suicide. I won't share the method. But I was being walked around the courtyard of this apartment. We were moving again. And my mother's boyfriend and my aunt's boyfriend were slapping me to consciousness because I was losing consciousness. And oddly enough, at my mother's funeral in 2016, that ex-boyfriend was at her funeral. And it was cathartic in so many ways, because I probably had seen him, between the time of 12 and 30, but I think all of it was coming to a close when I saw him at my mother's funeral. And I thanked him, I think, for the first time, like, thank you for helping to save my life. And he had tears in his eyes and was like, I'm so happy you're still here. And it was just one of those full circle moments. I think that was probably one of the most poignant moments. And that took 18 years to happen. Well, no, not 18. That was 2016. So that was 5 years ago. So 12
14 years, yeah. 14 years later.
It was it 14?
About, yeah. Yeah.
Wait, 5 years ago. How old am I? 49? I was 45. So 32 years. Is that right?
Oh, because you would have been 10.
Yeah.
Or 12
32,
when you had the
33
first
years.
attempt.
32, 33 years later, I finally said thank you to this man.
Do you feel like that feeling of hopelessness, because you said that's what stands out, do you feel like that feeling of hopelessness was finally relinquished at that point?
With him?
Just in general, like, do you feel like there was like a peace that came with being able to say thank you to the man who, encouraged you through attempting suicide?
I think that was just something that I felt when you're going through survival mode, and a lot of people, I talk about not living. I was just surviving. I was going from one task to another to another. I was a single mom for a long time. Okay, so I've got to get Taylor through this, and I've got to work through that, and I've got to do this, and everything is task driven and task oriented, and I'm just surviving. There's no living. There's no real value in life. It's literally just surviving. And then in the early parts of your life, I was struggling with depression. You don't have time to process things. So you could be going through all these traumatic events and you're just suppressing them because you don't have time. You don't have time to fall out on the floor and have a hissy fit and cry. You don't have time to bawl and say, why God, why me? Because you got to go to work, you got to make a meal, you have to get the kids ready for school, or you have to drive her to tennis, or you have to pay for this bill, and you just don't have time. So you go into that survival. I got to fight through it. The fight mode, right? So you suppress all these things. Well, after you start really addressing and confronting everything that you've gone through, now this stuff comes up.
And do you feel like seeing him was one of
and
those
it
moments?
was one of those things. I hadn't even thought about saying thank you to this man before Until seeing him, because now I've had years of processing things. I'm walking in healing, walking in joy. I love my life. I'm not depressed anymore. I'm not suicidal. And I see him, and because I've unpacked all these things that I've suppressed, now it's like, oh my gosh.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, okay, moving from that question, thinking about one person that you feel was sent to you, like, by God in your life, is there any one person that stands out? Because your youth was so traumatic from, being alone all the time, but also being responsible to babysit your cousins while you're watching your parent, like your mother and her sister party all the time, and then being sexually assaulted by an uncle, and then being raped by your father, like all of these things happening. Do you feel like there was just one person that like was totally sent from heaven?
I've been asked that question before. I share my story a lot, and people are always like, well, there's always one person. The only way that we really get over, and really these success stories, there's someone that was a mentor that helped you. No, there was not. The person that was God sent for me, there were two. The last suicide attempt, when I was 30, these two officers were sent. That kicked the door in.
We're going to go into that, actually.
Okay.
So I'll, stop you there. So, again, Michelle, I never call her Michelle, so I'm taking over. I'm taking my opportunity. But so she did go through her most recent attempted suicide 19 years ago, you said. And so thinking about that, I know that I'll ask this question and then I'll go to the former question. But what role would you say the police played in your most recent attempt, again, over 15 years ago now, 19 years ago?
It'll be 19 in October. So 18 years. They were, the primary reason, one of the primary reasons that I sit here before you. Ultimately, it was God, right? Because I did physically flatline and was gone for a few minutes. They did mouth-to-mouth, chest compressions, oxygen,
defibrillator.
The defibrillator several times on me. And I'm here, right? But I don't recall the ambulance ride at all. I was not conscious. I don't know if I was gone, or I don't know what state I was in, but I was not conscious. But those police officers would not leave. I lied and told them I was fine, I hadn't done anything, and they wouldn't leave until I lost consciousness. The officer sat there with me. They had not been trained on CIT, crisis intervention training at that time. That was 2002, October, in Alsip, Illinois. But they trusted their gut intuition, and they sat with me. And I was in my head like, please leave so I can die. That was literally what I was thinking and praying in my head to myself. But they wouldn't leave. Mm-hmm. So God used them. When you say, did God send one person? He sent two. He sent two people to start me on the trajectory, that shift in the direction for a new life, for actually starting to live. And that process wasn't easy.
Yep.
It didn't take place overnight. It wasn't presto changeo. Oh, I died and I came back and I wanted to live. I died and came back. The nurse said, welcome back. Mm. And I was angry. I wanted to curse her out. Like, why am I still here, God? Why do you want to use me for a punching bag? When will my pain end? Mm. So I wasn't one of those stories where I had this whole experience and now I'm thankful for life. No, took a long time, took a lot of work.
And it makes you think too, because I know that there's been a lot of conversation about police officers, and I wanted to take the opportunity to talk to you about that because I know your experience in that way. You know, obviously police brutality is still very real. Police, what's the word I'm looking for?
Bias.
The bias, the racism, the, what is it called? The profiling. The profiling still exists, and it is still very real. But John and I talk about this all the time. You and I talk about this all the time. The importance of training, because naturally I think we all do have bias, but when you're in a position of power, it's not okay to let your bias lead your decision making.
And so I need to step in there for 1 second, because I hear people saying training a lot, and although I agree, I speak with NAMI, which is National Alliance on Mental Illness, and I help to train the officers in their CIT, their crisis intervention training. I share my story when I was 30 of how these police officers interacted with me. I always share with them, this was before the CIT training. And you know what the difference was? They weren't CIT trained, but they saw my life as valuable.
Yep.
They refused to let me die in that apartment with or without training. They trusted their gut intuition. They saw me as a valuable human being, 30-year-old woman, black woman, but I had value. So they refused to let me die. So yes, we need training. But often, even with that Derek Chauvin, he had crisis intervention training. He was CIT trained more than once. Humanity is needed.
Yeah, it's getting back to humanity and making sure. And I think that's still kind of, to me, it still kind of comes from training, but not even necessarily. I feel like it's a whole nother larger issue. But I do think that it's important for people to be, if you're part of a community where you're policing, you need to be part of that community.
100%.
And we've talked about this too. And not even just, black. For me, at least, I always say I don't think black police officers need to be policing black communities. Right. But if you're a white officer and you're policing in a black community, then maybe you need to be living there. Maybe you need to be volunteering there. You need to be a part of the community.
Maybe you need to know the community.
Exactly. Like Officer Franny. Or Friendly.
Friendly. Yeah, it was Friendly.
I had a situation when I was in grammar school. I was in 6th grade, and this boy slapped me in the face while I was walking home from school, and my mom was like, I never want her to think that it's okay for somebody to put their hands on her. So, and I was like, obviously very upset about it when she got home from work, and she called the police that night, and they ended up going to his house, and it was
I went with them.
It was a wild night, and we ended up going to court. We had a restraint. I mean, it was a whole thing, and I was 11 years old, but Officer Franny, I think it was Officer Friendly or Friendly, I don't know, but she was great, and if you're out there and you're listening, thank you, because that was great. But
and she was even great with me.
And again, humanity, right? Like, we've lost that people piece to where now we're just so biased, and our bias turns into racism, and then now we're killing people because we don't see them as people.
I went with this officer, and I was irate. I was beyond, okay? And she saw me as a mother. She saw me as a concerned mother.
Yep.
She talked me down because I was not about to be as intellectual or as astute as I am right now. Somebody was about to catch these hands. Because when we went to the mother's house, as soon as she opened the door, we understood why the boy thought it was okay to slap my daughter.
She just wasn't a very present mom. Like, she was very much like, well, that her answer, I'll never forget that. She's like, that's because your daughter likes my little boy, or something stupid. Like, why would that even be the reason that he would need to slap you? Even though that wasn't true, because he was not.
Still, do you remember his handprint was still on your face when I came home that day?
I remember that.
Yeah. The neighbor, remember? Anyway, sorry. But anyway, the point is that officer saw humanity. Yep. She saw another mother.
Exactly.
She saw what could have been her daughter, right? Yep. That's all she saw. She didn't see a color. And yes, we need to see color. Yep. Because I'm not the person, I don't see color. But she didn't allow color to cause bias, to
dictate her decision making, because she could have looked at us and said, oh, they're black, who cares, it's probably something weird going on anyway, so we're not going to do it. But she saw you as a human being and as a person. So we'll get back on track here. Sorry, that was a sidetrack, but I'm glad though that's what stands out to you though, because I think that's what keeps us grounded, is having those human experiences beyond the badge, beyond the uniform. They saw you, you saw them, and like you were reflecting back and seeing them as a big part of why you're here today, beside obviously God's influence on your life. So let's talk about your life today. What would you say is one thing your life today? So what would you say is one thing that you learned from your first marriage?
Oh boy. How to follow my gut. When your gut tells, ladies, listen, okay, can we talk, sisters, black sisters, white sisters, Hispanic sisters, Asian sisters, I don't care who you are. When your gut tells you, no, this is not him, listen. It will save you a world of damage on your soul, your mind, your will, and your emotions, and on your spirit, and on your life, and on your seed, and on your child. It will save you a world of trauma.
Yep.
My gut said no, but because I had suppressed trauma and trauma-related issues, I didn't trust myself. Yep. And at this point, this is before I married him, before my last suicide attempt. So this is before I'd started to address the traumas and really deal with everything and confront everything. So because of that, I didn't trust my own voice. I didn't trust that inner voice that said, he ain't it. And I know I said ain't, that's not grammatically correct, but that is what that relationship needed.
Yep.
He ain't it.
Yep, exactly.
Trust it.
So trust your gut, everyone out there. Whether, honestly, men too, because on the flip side, there are some women who might not have it all.
And he should have trusted his gut too, because I'm sure his gut told him I wasn't it.
Maybe not. So going into life today, what are you most passionate about? I know you're a speaker, you're an author, you're a coach. She actually wrote a great book, When She Flipped. And it's all about living, I'll just share a really brief highlight, forgiveness, love, purpose, and transformative thoughts. I'm with you, girl.
Yeah, you are.
So the book walks you through like how to forgive, how to love, how to live on purpose, and then how to transform your thoughts, FLPT, When She Flipped. So knowing that about you, you talk a lot about forgiveness, love, purpose, and transformative thoughts. What are you most passionate about ultimately?
Ultimately, I'm passionate about shining the light so that people can get hope. That's really it. Hope, as I speak with crisis intervention, as I share my story on different platforms, it is all inevitably about creating a place of hopefulness, that we can go out and walk on purpose, in purpose, that we can do what we've been put in this earth to do. Because when we all show up in the way that God intended for us to show up, then we'll automatically help each other.
Yep.
Then we'll automatically see each other.
Yep.
Then there won't be bias that will inform or control how you interact with people, because you're walking in purpose. Yep. God will never create purpose that divides us, ever. Ever. So if everyone gets in there, the Bible talks about being jointly fit every joint is fit to do something. When my finger starts showing up as my toe, I'm going to have a problem. Imagine it.
Yeah, if your finger starts trying to crawl.
I'm going to have a problem. If my elbow wants to act as my thigh, we're going to have a problem.
Yep.
But when we all show up together and do our part, we are fitly joined together and we can be productive human beings. We can get to the end goal. We can help each other. We can arrive at those desired destinations for everybody's life.
So for you, it's more so about showing other people how to get to the place.
How to get to that place.
And that's where the coaching comes in, because you get, even just honestly authoring too. And speaking of, I mean, they all kind of tie together, because now you're encouraging people to see the light within them and externally too, I guess you could say. And everybody is working together as a collective unit.
And it's really, I said hope, but it's the hope for who you are, right? When you're hopeless, you're 9 times out of 10 not going to be walking in your purpose. You're just not.
And I love how hope comes back around in this. It kind of threads your story, because the thing that we said earlier when I asked you about, what's the one thing that stood out about your your many attempted suicides, over the course of all 4 attempts, you said it was hopelessness. And so now you're walking in your perfect truth, where now providing hope. And so thinking about that, you guys, what's one thing, I just want to leave a question for you before we wrap up, is just what's one thing in your life that you've, like, maybe you're in the process of conquering, or you've already conquered, that's probably going to be your path.
Yes.
Right? A lot of times, because she does a lot of this work around helping people to figure out what their path is. And I think you've even helped me, where you're like, Taylor, what's the thing that you've struggled with? Okay, then go do that. And I think a lot of times that is usually your path. If you've conquered something, then you didn't conquer it for no reason. You conquered it to be able to share your story, and it's probably a big part of your calling and your why. Like,
and
everybody
to share with others how they can conquer it.
That's exactly it. That's exactly how we live in our why, so to speak. So I love that, though, being able to show. I love the fact that we started with, like, the hopelessness, and now that's what you want to give to other people and help them get there. So, well, who's one person you admire, and why, and what qualities do they have?
Oh my gosh, I admire so many people. I could go deep.
You can only pick one.
I could go deep and say Jesus. But that's
I thought she was gonna say I can go deep and say you.
That's too deep.
Never mind.
That's too deep. No, but I will say honestly, oh my gosh, this is going to. I have to pick 2.
You can only pick one.
This is gonna sound haughty. I have finally come to the point in my life.
Do not say it.
I'm going to say it.
I already know what she's about,
what am I about to say.
What do you guys think she's about to say?
What am I about
Who
to
does
say?
she admire? We're checking out the chat. When she started with, this is going to sound haughty, I knew where it was going.
Where's it going?
Yourself?
Yes! Why would... Listen. No, I need the floor for a minute. Ladies and gentlemen, why would I go through all the hell that I went through? My mother never told me she loved me. It's in the ground, buried 5 years over, and I never heard I love you. Never heard I'm proud of you. My biological father raped me, did all types of vile things to me. I never felt safe. Yet I sit here before you sharing my story with my amazing, beautiful, wonderful daughter, who is well balanced and has all these talents and all these gifts and has broken curses. God has used me to be the conduit to the curses being broken. Yeah. I'm still here in sound mind. I love my life finally. Y'all don't know how much of a blessing that is for me to say that. I did not want to live. Like, literally. I did not want to be here.
I could see why you admire yourself, though.
For 32, 33, even after the last suicide, for about 32, 33 years, I did not want to live. I didn't want to exist.
Yep.
Why wouldn't I admire me?
So who's your second person? Guys, I'm letting her pick 2 people.
Because look, we as women, I want her to, she's going to learn from this live right now. Why do we downplay our brilliance?
It's true.
Why do we downplay our excellence? Why do we downplay what God has given us and our expertise and our gifts and our talents and our abilities and what we've overcome? Why do we downplay it and we have to put someone else
That's
above
true.
us? This is not false humility. This is not pride. I am thankful to God that he brought me through. But Michelle had to do the work.
Yeah.
God didn't come down off the throne to do the work for me. The Bible says faith without works is dead being alone. I put a lot of works into this.
That's fair.
I did a lot of transforming my thoughts through God's word now. Okay, because I'm not God. I had to ask him, Lord, how do you see me? Because I've heard what everybody else says. I heard what my family saw. I heard that they think I'm crazy. I heard that they don't think I'm valuable. But God, what did you say about me? And I had to do the work to recite that every single day, every time those debilitating lies that were told about me, sometimes from my own mind, sometimes from my own thoughts. I had to combat that. I had to do the work. I had to get into the mirror literally and tell myself, you are an overcomer because Jesus loved you. If nobody else loves you, God loves you. So why wouldn't I admire me? I do admire me.
That's fine. We don't need a second one. I think she sold me, you guys. So that's good. I'm glad that you admire yourself, though, because she is right. I mean, we do often find ourselves dumbing ourselves down and putting somebody else in that number one seat. And it ends up being, oh, I have to admire everybody but me, when we do have a lot of great talents and gifts. So I will take that.
Thank you.
Okay, so wrapping it up, what 3 tips, well, I have one more question after this, but what 3 tips would you give, or it doesn't have to be 3, but what tips would you give to somebody struggling through depression?
First, acknowledge it. And I know as I say that, depression is this dark, deep hole that you want to keep a secret because you don't feel that anyone will understand.
So how can they actually acknowledge it?
Because we are now sitting in front of you, telling you, showing you the outcome of someone coming on the other side. There is hope.
Yep. So do you think acknowledging it means they need to go and talk to somebody else maybe about it?
So that is the point. First is acknowledgement. Saying, you know what? This is something that hasn't left. Because a lot of times people will downplay depression and say, well, I've only been feeling a little out of sorts for a week. How long? Asking yourself, how long has this been around, right? How long has it happened? Is this situational depression? Did someone die? And of course you're going to be depressed if you were close to the person. But how deep is it? Are you getting out of the bed? There are certain little
cues.
There are certain cues that you can look for and say, wait a minute, this is probably clinical depression. So acknowledge it first, right? Yeah. That's first. Once you acknowledge it and say, okay, wait, I have flown or I have sunken into this place of depression. Now reach out for help. Now, what does that help look like? For everybody, it might not be therapy. Yes, in the perfect world, everyone would have a therapist to talk with. Everyone would have a therapist to, gauge, what their options are and get help and get someone with some clinical psych expertise to help you. Yeah. But it might not always be therapy. Sometimes it's talking to your best friend, sharing with her, you know what? I think I'm in depression right now. And I don't mean the best friend that's reckless. Yeah. I mean the person that you might admire.
So question, what if they don't have a best friend? What if they have a similar story to you where you felt like very alone? They feel like they don't have anybody to talk to. Who should they go to?
Call 800-273-8255. If you feel completely alone, 800-273-8255. If you're having thoughts of suicide, if you are in this depressive state, they can help you. They can help you get a therapist. Depending on your financial status, you might be able to get free therapy. Dial 800-273-8255.
And then what would be your third tip you would say after they reach out for help?
After you reach out for help, once you're reaching out for help and you get the help you need, you're going to do the work. It's time to do the work. Sometimes doing that work means medication. Clinical therapy, clinical depression, you might need medication. Okay, take the medication. Now, when you take the medication and that dark, deep cloud is removed, now you may have to change behaviors. Because when you are in a depressive state, 9 times out of 10, I would dare go out on a limb and say, you're having dysfunctional activity. Something's going on where you're doing something that's not productive, whether it's sleeping all the time, whether it's weight gain or weight loss, because some people can't eat when they're depressed. Some people eat too much. What behaviors do you need to change? It's time to do the work. Now, the work doesn't come in the beginning. You're not doing the work and, talking back to yourself and asking God. The work is after the acknowledgement, after you've sought help. Now it's time to do the work on yourself, because depression always has a root. Yes, there can be clinical depression. They told me I had a chemical imbalance. I was in 2 mental hospitals. I served time, and I felt like it was serving time in these mental hospitals, mental health facilities. Medication didn't work for me. I went to social workers, all these different things. What worked for one may not work for another. The third thing is do the work and don't stop doing the work. I don't care if the medication doesn't help. What will help you?
Yep.
Is it church? Is it your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, your best friend, your screen again? What is it that will help? Do not stop. Do not give up on you. Do the work that you need to do to be healthy mentally.
I love it. That's good. So, final question. How can people connect with you? Are there any current passion projects that you need support with? I know you have a lot of changes coming up in your life right now. So, how can people connect with you? And just so you guys know, in the chat, I've been posting some of those tips that she shared from her Out of My Shell Instagram, so go and follow her as well. But are there any projects or anything that people can help you and connect with you on?
I would love it if you would go over to my Out of My Shell YouTube page and subscribe to the page. Watch the videos, comment, click like. I do have some jarring life changes that are really exciting coming up, so I'll be more active in social media. I will have many other speaking engagements that I'll keep you guys posted on. Follow me on Instagram at Outa, OUTTAMICHELLE. It's Out of My Shell, and it's the same on YouTube. It's the same on Facebook, Out of My Shell. You can follow me all over there. You can, of course, go purchase the book When She Flipped. Flipped is the acronym for Forgiveness, Love, Purpose, and Transformative Thoughts. It's everywhere books are sold. And yes, that's pretty much it.
Thank you.
Thank
This was
you.
so good. Thank you to all of you out there who are watching, who watched throughout the actual live, or if you're watching on the replay. I'm so glad to be able to have my mom, Michelle Jackson, on this show tonight. But yeah, the Fueled by Faith series, I definitely think that she has been instrumental in letting her faith lead her. Regardless of what the season looked like, season, reason, lifetime, or treason. I like that. I love the add-on of treason, but through all 4 of those different aspects and phases of her life, she's definitely let faith lead her, even when it seemed like she was hopeless. So I'm really happy to have you on Fueled by Faith, and I hope you guys all enjoyed it. I will have this posted within a day or 2. Like I said, she's actually visiting from out of town, so we're going to go and eat some pizza now. Vegan pizza.
Can you believe that?
She's like, no way, but she's gonna try it, so that's cool. So we're gonna go hang out, and then I'll post the replay, but please do go and follow her Out of My Shell page, which is in the comments here. And like I said, I'll be posting links to all of this, our interview, her YouTube, my YouTube, everything on my blog, thetaylorisms.org. So thank you guys again. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Or
and thank
morning.
you, Taylor. Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Thank you.